deaf passenger trembles as a canine approaches him at a U.S. airport. Minutes later, security uncovers a terrifying secret, hidden not in his bag but stitched inside his shirt. What starts as a routine screening spirals into a biosecurity emergency, tied to a 15-year-old refugee mystery. Was he a victim, or something far more dangerous? This is not fiction. It feels too real for that. If the story grips you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us, because the truth unfolds one twist at a time. There was something oddly cinematic about the arrivals terminal at JFK that morning. Maybe it was the early light filtering through the high glass windows or the sudden sharpness of motion amid the drowsy shuffle of passengers. TSA officer Jordan Bell didn't usually notice details like that. After 9 years at the same post, faces blurred and routines blurred even more. But today felt different. Maybe it started with the dog. Kaiser, the German shepherd trained for narcotics and explosives, suddenly pulled taut on his leash near gate C8. Jordan barely had time to register the shift before Kaiser emitted a low growl, not the usual signal for a drug find, not the abrupt bark that came with explosive detection. This sound was different. Controlled, warning, persistent. "Something wrong, buddy," Jordan murmured. Kaiser didn't respond to the command. He was fixed, ears forward, body tense, locked onto a man in a navy pea coat, standing awkwardly just off the walkway. The man didn't look suspicious. In fact, he looked tired, overdressed for the summer chill, hands clutching a passport and a small gray duffel. But what caught Jordan's eye wasn't the man's clothing. It was his face. Pale, sweating, and, more than anything, panicked. As soon as Kaiser approached, the man stepped back, not in fear, more like instinct. Flight reflect, but not like any American Sign Language Jordan had ever seen. The gestures were frantic, circular, inconsistent. "Hey," Jordan said, raising a palm, using calm, measured tones. "Sir, I need you to stay still. Step over here, please." He gestured to the side where TSA protocol called for secondary screening. The man didn't move. He looked from Kaiser to Jordan, eyes wide, then raised both hands again and signed something, more precisely this time, but still strange, like a dialect Jordan didn't recognize. One of the other agents nearby leaned in. "He deaf?" "I think so," Jordan said. "But that's not ASL. I studied 2 semesters, this is something else." The man began stepping back now, and Kaiser lunged again, not toward the bag, but toward the man's chest. Another growl, louder, sharper. Jordan's instincts kicked in. He held up both hands, signaling to the officers nearby. "We need an interpreter, fast." "Pull the man aside, carefully." The others moved quickly, not aggressively, but with authority. The man flinched. One of the officers touched his elbow lightly. That's when it happened. The man yelped, not a voice but a high, choking gasp, and dropped to his knees. He clutched his chest, not in pain but protectively. Kaiser barked sharply now, and people nearby began to look. Jordan could hear murmurs ripple through the terminal. A nearby mother tugged her child closer. A pilot slowed his walk, glancing over. Something about the air had shifted. "Pull security footage," Jordan told the junior agent beside him. "I want to see when this guy came in. And notify the supervisor something's off." The man looked up suddenly, his expression shifting from fear to pleading. He tapped his own throat, then chest, then pointed toward the badge on Jordan's uniform, then repeated the strange signs again, this time slower, more deliberate. Jordan narrowed his eyes. "He's not just a language barrier," he muttered. "He's trying to tell us something, but he doesn't know how." Kaiser barked again. This time he nosed closer to the man's upper torso. Not the bag, not the shoes, the chest. Jordan crouched down slightly, voice low. "Sir, I need to inspect you, not the bag, you, okay?" No answer. Just those same circular gestures, mouth opening but no sound. Jordan reached slowly toward the man's coat and touched the zipper. The man jolted backward. Terror. Real, raw terror. "Get medical on standby," Jordan said quickly. "He's not sick, but something he doesn't want touched." A second agent leaned in, whispering, "You think he's body pack?" Jordan shook his head. "No, not drugs. Not the way Kaiser's acting. He's alerting to something else. And that man's scared of us, not just of getting caught." The interpreter arrived, mid-30s, woman with quick eyes and a calm voice. She knelt down, flashed her ID, and began signing in fluid ASL. The man responded, but not fluently. His signs were halting, mismatched, laced with motions the interpreter frowned at. He's not using standard ASL, she said. It looks like old European sign, some Eastern Bloc version. I'll need time. Jordan nodded. Take it. Something's not right. In the background, Jordan saw officers beginning to cordon the area. Not full lockdown, but the subtle repositioning of personnel that said, "We're watching everything." The man, seeing more uniforms, shrank into himself, then signed something frantic, repeating a motion like pressing something to his chest. The interpreter hesitated. I think he's saying he's a victim, that he's carrying something, that he doesn't know how to stop it. Jordan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Carrying what? He asked. He responded. More motions, rapid, distress. She paled. He said he's leaking something. Inside the shirt, they said I would not feel, they lied. Jordan straightened. She nodded. He says he was taken, forced. This isn't his plan. Jordan exhaled slowly. Behind him, Kaiser growled again, deeper this time. The terminal lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the tile. Jordan looked back at the man who now sat trembling. This wasn't an arrest. This was a crisis unfolding, and it had just begun. The interpreter's name was Elena Mirkovich, a contractor often called in for multilingual sign communication emergencies. Her background was impressive. 7 years at UNHCR, fluent in ASL, BSL, and several regional systems used by displaced populations across Eastern Europe. But after just 2 minutes of interaction with the man, her brow furrowed with unmistakable confusion. He's not using ASL, she repeated, glancing at Jordan and the supervising TSA officer. He's not Polish sign either. It's archaic. I've seen it before, years ago in a refugee center outside Chisinau. This is Moldovan Soviet A sign. Pre-Andization. Practically extinct. The words struck Jordan like a slow echo. Refugee. Soviet A. Outdated systems. None of this lined up with a man who was supposedly just a passenger connecting flights in New York. He said he's leaking something, Jordan pressed. What else did he say? Elena shook her head slowly. Her fingers interlaced tightly. His grammar is broken, it's hard to be sure. I asked for a name, he gave me 3, none consistent. Asked for a location, he pointed to his chest again, then the word inside. Over and over, but it's more than that, he keeps repeating a symbol like this. That's not medical, that's metaphorical, it's fear, contamination, or guilt. Jordan stepped back, his mind racing. The man's duffel bag had already gone through the scanner, standard X-ray and chemical sniff test. Nothing, no devices, no organic threats, clean. But his body, that was another story. The biometric scanner at secondary inspection picked up anomalies. Elevated heart rate approaching 130 ppm. Skin temperature unremarkable. Pupils dilated but no narcotics trace on the retina scanner. He wasn't high, he was afraid. But of what? Dr. Monroe, the on-site medical consultant, reviewed the screen. Heart rate's off the charts, but look, no sweat, no dehydration. If this were a panic attack, we'd see other symptoms. Adrenaline's not matching the cardio activity. It's almost like the body's trying to fight off something it doesn't recognize. He's not sick? Jordan asked. In the viral sense, Monroe replied, staring at the data. But there's something internal. I'd call it stress hypercardia. But this is different. The nervous system isn't responding normally. It's like something foreign is triggering his system. Could he be a mule? One of the officers offered. Maybe body packing capsules? Monroe frowned. Even if he were, the biometric signs would differ. And Kaiser wouldn't alert to drugs. He alerts to biological volatility. Blood, nerve agents, radiological traces. You said he focused on the chest? Jordan nodded. Not the stomach, not the bag. Right at the sternum. Monroe exchanged a glance with Elena, who now stood with arms crossed tightly, watching the man. Ask him what's in his chest, she tried. The man's eyes followed her hands, but his response was shakier now. He signed something resembling Vapolis, followed by another swirling motion near his heart. They said quiet, he added. Elena translated aloud, her voice trembling slightly. He says, They told me no pain. They lied. Jordan exhaled, shifting his stance. He scanned the man's travel record, pulled from the internal eye system. Arrived on a flight from Munich, before that transited through Chisinau and a small domestic airfield in southern Belarus. No checked luggage on record, no travel alerts, no criminal flag. Just a paper trail that barely existed. We're going to need full-body imaging, Jordan said quietly. Hey, chest x-ray, whatever it takes. Monroe raised a brow. You think he's carrying? Not willingly, Jordan replied. But something's not right and I'm not taking chances. The man was escorted, gently but firmly, to a separate inspection room. Elena walked beside him, signing slowly to maintain calm. Kaiser was held back now, his reaction still heightened, body vibrating with low growls that made the hairs on Jordan's arms stand up. At the terminal checkpoint, TSA officers were rerouting passengers through neighboring gates. News hadn't spread, but the tension was building. It always did in moments like this, when no one quite understood what the threat was, but everyone felt it. Back in the observation room, Jordan watched as Monroe and the medical team began external scans. No foreign objects under the skin, no surgical scars. But then, the handheld electromagnetic imager beeped. What is that? Monroe asked sharply. The screen showed a faint metallic reading, faint, almost imperceptible, but consistent. Right under the clavicle, Monroe adjusted the scanner and tried again. Same spot, same signal. Could be a medical device? An assistant offered. Not registered, Monroe said flatly. No pacemaker, no defibrillator. Nothing in his file, no scar tissue either. If it's in there, it's recent and non-invasive. Jordan's voice was tight. Implant? Possibly, but it's not transmitting, not yet. Jordan turned toward Elena. Can you ask if he remembers any procedure, surgery, anything foreign done to his body? She relayed the question. The man froze. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat and pulled something out. Small, metal, and rectangular. A hearing aid. He held it up like an offering, but something about it looked wrong. Elena tilted her head. He's deaf. Profoundly, that thing shouldn't even be useful. Monroe stepped forward, taking it with gloved hands. He pried it open carefully. Inside was a chip, not an audio amplifier. A microchip shielded. What the hell? Jordan's blood turned cold. Of what? What's inside him? Elena asked again. The man only looked down, mouthing something silent, then signing the same motion again, spiral downward, chest to gut. Jordan stepped back, pulse hammering. We need hazmat, we need DHS now! But even as he spoke, the monitor beside them beeped. The heart rate had jumped again, now over 145 beats. The man wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, but something in his body was escalating. Monroe paled. If that chip controls anything inside him and his heart rate keeps climbing, Jordan interrupted, eyes narrowing. Then someone might already be watching, waiting for a trigger, or a detonation. He turned back to the glass. The man sat slumped now, eyes unfocused, moving with no sound. Elena whispered, He's praying. I think he knows what's coming. And then, from the hallway, came a voice, one of the junior agents, running breathless. Sir, customs just flagged something, same flight, same region, but this time it's in cargo. Jordan froze. What kind of cargo? The agent looked pale. Medical supplies. Unchecked. Labeled humanitarian. It was bigger. And it wasn't finished. Kaiser was no longer simply alert. He was locked in, growling with a low resonance that vibrated through the linoleum beneath their feet. The dog's entire focus had homed in on one point, the man's chest, specifically just above the sternum, where the coat had slipped open during the biometric scanning. Officer Jordan Bell didn't speak, didn't move. He understood what it meant when Kaiser growled like that. Not just detection, but confrontation. The last time it happened was during a training drill with live explosives. The K9 unit had simulated a false threat, but Kaiser had picked up on a real residue from a handler's glove. The K9's accuracy had become almost unnerving, and today, the sound in his throat told Jordan they weren't dealing with assumptions anymore. Dr. Monroe stood beside the table, frowning at the metal readings still pulsing on the scan. Something's embedded, but it's shallow. It could be dermal. Jordan shook his head. Then why the reaction? Kaiser doesn't alert like this unless it's unstable or volatile. Monroe nodded grimly and leaned closer. We'll need to examine him physically. Strip search protocol. Controlled room, minimum contact. They moved fast. The man didn't resist, but he trembled violently when his coat was removed, his breath shallow and rapid, as though he feared what they were about to discover more than they did. His shirt beneath was damp, clinging to his chest, revealing a thin gray polymer strip running vertically along his left side, just below the clavicle. It wasn't taped or bandaged. It was woven into the fabric of his undershirt, threaded in a way that seemed almost industrial, yet done with surgical precision. "What the hell is that?" Jordan muttered, stepping forward. Monroe pulled a portable magnifier from his coat pocket and examined the strip. "That's tubing," he said finally, voice low. "Gas line. Microvented." Jordan's pulse spiked. "As in respirator?" Monroe didn't look up. "No, quite. This isn't connected to any breathing apparatus. It's embedded. Look here." He pointed to the intersection of the tubing and a flat, metallic component no larger than a USB stick, resting flush against the man's ribs. "That's a valve. Internal or external, hard to say yet." "Could it be medical?" Alina asked, eyes wide as she hovered near the back of the room. "Not without documentation," Monroe replied. "And he doesn't have any. Not on file, not on his person. There's no ID indicating respiratory illness, no implanted device registry, and no surgical record. This doesn't belong." At that moment, Kaiser barked sharply again, tail rigid, eyes fixed on the small junction at the man's side where the tubing appeared to suddenly pulse. Jordan stiffened. "You see that?" Monroe nodded slowly. "It's rhythmically expanding, like something's being regulated." "You mean, it's active?" Monroe glanced at the monitors. "Not connected to anything electrical that we can read, but it's working, which means it's drawing from somewhere." Jordan's gaze fell to the man's abdomen. "Battery? Possible. Or worse, chemical reaction, something internal feeding the system." The man suddenly slumped forward, both hands reaching for his shirt as if to hide the tubing. Elena rushed forward, gently stopping him with a soft touch to his wrist. "It's okay," she signed slowly, trying to maintain eye contact. "We're not hurting you, we need to understand." He didn't respond, just shook his head, tears beginning to form at the corners of his eyes. Jordan turned to Monroe. "Can we safely remove it?" Monroe's lips tightened. "Not here. If that valve is pressure sealed, or if it reacts to movement, we could trigger, well, anything, gas, liquid. Worse." Kaiser barked again, more urgent this time. Jordan's breath caught. "He's escalating." "Then we need to act now," Monroe said. "Prep the isolation chamber, hazmat suits. I want this entire room sterilized." Jordan nodded and moved to radio the command post. But before he could press the button, one of the junior agents burst into the room, breathless and pale. "We just reviewed the X-ray again. There's a second line of tubing. It runs along his back, hidden beneath the shoulder blade." Monroe cursed under his breath. They mirrored the system, one on the front, one on the back, possibly a closed loop. Jordan glanced at the man. "So whatever's inside isn't just implanted, it's being circulated?" "Exactly," Monroe said. "And the body heat keeps it stable. You disrupt circulation, it could go volatile." The implication hung heavy in the air. Alina signed slowly again, asking one question. The man hesitated, then nodded. "Just once." Jordan stepped forward. "Ask him where it came from." She did. He replied with one slow motion, two hands forming a triangle, then pressing to his heart. "He says laboratory. They tested me first." He tried to speak again, still no voice, just that same tortured spiral sound. Jordan turned to the medical assistant. "Get eyes on that humanitarian cargo, now." But before the assistant could move, the lights flickered overhead. Just a blip, barely a second, but enough. Kaiser barked. Once, short and brutal, and lunged. Not at the man, but at the tiny valve near his ribs, pawing at the air as though to block it. "Hold him back," Monroe shouted. Jordan grabbed the leash, yanking hard, and Kaiser fell back with a snarl. The valve now blinked once, a faint red glow. Monroe froze. "Did that just—" "Yes," Jordan said. "It did." The man collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest, eyes wide with pain but no sound emerging. Jordan leaned over him. Tell me what it does. Timer, it wakes up. Wakes up! What? And in the hallway beyond, the emergency lights began to cycle red, one by one. The blinking red lights overhead continued their slow, rhythmic pulse, as if mocking the urgency in the room. The man was slumped in a corner now, legs drawn close to his body, eyes unfocused but restless, as though searching for something neither visible nor nameable. Dr. Monroe and his team had stabilized him temporarily with a low-dose sedative administered intramuscularly, carefully avoiding the exposed area around the chest valve, which had ceased blinking but still emitted faint warmth when scanned. Kaiser remained stationed behind reinforced glass, pacing, occasionally releasing low growls that reverberated through the observation room like the distant tremors of a growing storm. Jordan stood just a few feet from the man, now seated on a metal chair in an isolated debriefing cell. No restraints, but the security presence outside was unmistakable. Eliane sat across from him, her hands raised, deliberate, composed. "He's calmer now," she said softly to Jordan. "The sedative helped, but I think it's something else. He wants to talk, or he wants to be heard." "Then ask him again what's inside him. What does that device do?" She nodded and began signing slowly, making sure her expressions remained neutral, her body open. The man responded more smoothly this time, although his gestures still bore the uneven rhythm of someone who'd learned to communicate under duress, not fluency. He touched his chest, then pointed outward, then shook his head. Then again, chest, outward shake. Elena watched carefully, her breath slowing to match his. "He says, he doesn't know," she finally translated. "He repeats that over and over. They put it in me, I didn't know, I didn't agree, I didn't want it." Jordan's jaw clenched. "Who are they?" Elena relayed the question. The man responded with a flurry of hand motions, flat palms pushing downward. Then one hand over his mouth, the other making a sharp slicing motion through the air. Elena hesitated. "He's describing them as faceless, no names, masks, always masks. He says he was sedated, that he woke up with this inside him, and now he says he's afraid that he'll activate something without knowing." Jordan stepped toward the glass, the reflection of the man's trembling fingers dancing across his own chest. "So he doesn't even know what he's carrying? Or he's too scared to say," Elena replied. "But he insists. He's a victim, not a courier, not a terrorist, a hostage, a vessel." Monroe entered from the adjoining medical room, carrying a printed manifest in one hand and a tablet in the other. "You need to see this," he said, his voice tight. "Flight records just came in. Passenger logs, gate scans, flight paths. His itinerary was altered 36 hours before boarding." Jordan's eyebrows raised. "Altered by whom?" "That's the problem," Monroe replied. "There's no logged request from the passenger. Change was made through a third-party travel coordinator based in Chisinau. Completely legal except for one detail." Jordan cut in. "Let me guess. The original flight wasn't routed through Munich." "Exactly," Monroe confirmed. "He was supposed to land in Istanbul. Final destination was Amman, but he was rerouted, first through Minsk, then Munich, then JFK. The Belarus leg was never declared. No customs check, no surveillance." Jordan blinked. "That's impossible. The U.S. requires declaration of all transit points for highest nations. Minsk is on the watch list." Monroe handed over the tablet. "Take a look at the timestamp. The change was logged 2 hours after the last confirmed sighting of him in Moldova. But here's where it gets worse. Someone used an override code reserved for diplomatic medical aid transport." Jordan's eyes darkened. "So his documents were altered using a state-level access code?" "That's the implication," Monroe said. "We cross-referenced the code with previous usage. It's only been used 5 times in the last year, all for humanitarian transfers involving experimental medical evacuations." Jordan took a sharp breath. "So this isn't just a rogue operation. Someone's leveraging official systems to move him." Elena leaned forward. "He mentioned something else. Not in direct translation, but he keeps using the sign for clinic, then basement, then metal, over and over. He might have been held underground." Jordan ran his hand over his face. "We're not just looking at biohazard here. This smells like covert testing. Monroe pointed to the chest valve still visible on the man through the reinforced glass. You analyzed a swab from the surface. It's a composite alloy used in prototype containment units, extremely heat-sensitive, the kind used in labs to stabilize airborne compounds under high compression. Jordan's gaze snapped to him. Like neurotoxins? Exactly. But here's the real kicker, Monroe lowered his voice. There are signs the device was injected with microfiltration mesh. It's designed to slowly regulate pressure, not release it, which means the goal wasn't detonation, it was diffusion. Elena turned pale. They're turning him into a living dispersal unit. Jordan felt the full weight of those words settle into the room, like fog. Controlled leak, not an explosion. A slow, steady release. Through skin, breath, or movement. Monroe nodded grimly. It fits with the tubing. Passive dispersal activated by heart rate or body heat. At that moment, a chime sounded from the main security panel, an encrypted file transfer coming from Interpol. Agent Reed, seated at the corner desk, opened it. We've got an alert, she called. Cross-check came back. This guy was reported missing 6 months ago. Name's Dmitry Antonov, former paramedic in Moldova. Family filed a missing person report after he vanished en route to a border clinic. Jordan's hands curled into fists. And no one connected the dots when he showed up with altered ID? Because his documents passed every scan, Reed replied. Whoever did this had access to biometric override systems. They rebuilt his identity from scratch. Jordan stared through the glass again at Dmitry. No longer just a trembling man with a foreign signature of pain, but a body forced into betrayal. A life weaponized by silence. Dmitry looked up at that moment, as if sensing something shift. He raised his hand and slowly, methodically traced a motion from his chest to his mouth, then to the air. Elena translated without being asked. He says, it spreads when I breathe. Monroe turned sharply. Then we have a new problem. Jordan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The red emergency lights still blinked across the hallway, one after another, quiet, consistent, and unmistakably timed. Something, somewhere, had already begun. The moment the toxicology alert code was issued, the response protocol shifted from TSA control to CDC-FFE joint jurisdiction. Within 27 minutes, a Level B hazmat team from the CDC's Rapid Response Division arrived through a secure corridor, their vehicles escorted straight onto the tarmac, bypassing public areas entirely. 2 technicians, flanked by armed agents and escorted by airport security, stepped into the sealed zone where Dmitry sat quietly. His shirt loosened to avoid further skin contact with the tubing. His eyes were bloodshot now, whether from fear, sedatives, or something already coursing through his bloodstream was still unclear. Dr. Monroe briefed the newcomers in quick, clipped phrases, handing over the initial biological readings, heart rate fluctuations, valve activity, and atmospheric anomalies. The lead biochemist, Dr. Lynn Voss, examined the data while suiting up. We need to sample his clothing, she said, especially the inner lining near the dispersion junction. There might be off-gassing. Jordan watched silently from the observation glass, his earpiece crackling as the secondary hazmat chamber was prepared. The team worked with swift precision, one agent isolating Dmitry's undershirt with sterilized forceps, placing it into a vacuum-sealed cylinder, another scanning the tubing with a portable mass spectrometer calibrated for protein chains. The scanner chirped once, then again, then fell ominously silent. What do you see? Monroe asked. Dr. Voss didn't look up. Give me 30 seconds. Her eyes were flat, her jaw tight. It's neurotoxic. We confirmed traces of botulinum toxin, subtype A. Ambient concentration is low but measurable, which means it's leaking. Jordan stiffened. Leaking from where? His clothes? His skin? From the textile surrounding the valve, she clarified. It's designed to wick outward. That shirt isn't just fabric, it's reactive. Whoever manufactured this wanted dispersion to be subtle, not airborne in a cloud but passive, persistent. Long-term, Renault stepped closer. That's weaponized precision. You're saying he's an emission source? Botulinum toxin is the most lethal biological substance known. 1 nanogram can paralyze muscle tissue. This sample was likely diluted to stay below fatal threshold, but high enough to disrupt autonomic functions. Respiration, cardiac rhythm, digestion. Exposed over hours, even healthy individuals could collapse. Reed, listening in from the tactical channel, interrupted through Jordan's earpiece. You just got data back from the air scrubbers installed in Zone D. They caught microprotein fragments matching botulinum structure. Jordan turned cold. So it's already spread? Not system-wide, Reed added quickly. But it's in the controlled air loop. Had this been unchecked for another hour, Terminal C could have gone into full contamination. Jordan looked at Dr. Voss. Could someone have made this in a garage lab? She shook her head. No hesitation, hit a chance. This level of protein engineering requires controlled environments, triple isolated sterilization, and biosafety protocols at military grade. The toxin's folding structure is stable to 5 decimal points. That's not amateur work. That's state-level biotech. Elena's voice was hoarse from behind the glass. He said they used him as a test. What if this isn't just a trial? Monroe nodded grimly. Field test. Biological insertion into a civilian population. Untraceable. Slow. With minimal logistical footprint. Dr. Voss continued. And here's where it gets worse. The botulinum strain, it's not wild D, it's synthetic, lab-optimized. The protein sequence has markers embedded, nucleotide edits consistent with programs run at classified DTRA facilities. Jordan's head snapped toward her. DTRA? As in Defense Threat Reduction Agency? Exactly. This toxin, or the method used to build it, originated inside a U.S. military research project. Silence followed. Even Monroe's clipboard slipped slightly in his grip. You're telling me, Jordan said slowly, that this was made by us? No, she clarified. I'm saying it was designed by us. But the sample has variations we haven't seen before. Someone took the original research, probably Black Ops, not supposed to exist, and pushed it further. Different vectors, different delivery mechanics. Which means one of two things. Elena swallowed. And they tested it on him. Dimitri sat still now, eyelids half closed, breathing shallow but stable. His hands occasionally twitched in his lap, tapping an unconscious rhythm on his knee. Jordan felt the air thicken with the weight of implication. If this was military-grade biotech, and it's circulating in one man's shirt, how many others are out there? Dr. Voss didn't answer. Instead, she turned to Monroe. You need access to the original DTRA project files. Someone with Q-level clearance. This isn't just about decontamination anymore. It's about containment of knowledge. Reed chimed in again through the channel. Update on the cargo crate we flagged earlier. The one labeled humanitarian. It's been moved. Jordan's gut tightened. Moved where? Terminal E. Secondary storage. But it's not listed under aid supplies anymore. New manifest calls it pharmaceutical waste for destruction. Sender was a clinic in Belarus. Nadezhda Biologics. Ever heard of it? Dr. Voss looked up sharply. That name was flagged last year in a NATO briefing, allegedly a front for illicit vaccine trials. They disappeared after a fire destroyed their main lab. No survivors, but the lab's signature compound was botulinum hybrid proteins. Jordan's blood chilled. So someone scrubbed the clinic, but the research didn't die with it. Dr. Voss nodded. It evolved, and they found a way to send it here. One man, one cargo box, one airport. Elena leaned closer to Dimitri again, her hands gentle, almost trembling. Can you tell me anything else? She signed. He opened his eyes, unfocused. His fingers rose slowly and formed a single sign, 2 hands pressing together, then pushing apart. Elena blinked. He says, he wasn't the first. And behind them, in the hallway outside, a second monitor lit up. Another alert. Another biometric match. Another passenger who had cleared customs but never exited the terminal. The biometric match alert lit up the secondary security monitor like a silent alarm from inside a sealed room. And while officers scrambled to locate the unknown second subject, Dr. Monroe turned back to Dimitri's profile, eyes narrowing as he scrolled through the 3D renderings of the embedded tubing system. Something still wasn't adding up, not just in the configuration of the toxin dispersal mechanism, but in how it was reacting to his body's rhythm. Too precise, too coordinated, almost adaptive. That was when the technician at Station 7 flagged something subtle yet out of place. A fluctuating magnetic resonance in the lower left quadrant of Dimitri's torso, inconsistent with the valve signal. The electronic, she reported, but it's emitting a traceable pulse, very low frequency. Jordan leaned over her shoulder, brow furrowed. Could it be another sensor? The tech shook her head. No power source, no heat. This is passive, but it's piggybacking off his own body heat. Monroe glanced up. Thermal-activated GPS, maybe. The technician magnified the signature and cross-checked against a device library. A few moments later, an ID match popped up on screen. It's a nano GPS tracker, she said. Old military design. The kind used for tracking downed operatives. But this one's been modified. It's sewn into the lining of his clothing. Jordan didn't wait. He entered the decontamination chamber and approached Dmitri, gesturing for Alina to translate. She signed calmly, and Dmitri responded by slowly pulling open the inner seam of his undershirt, revealing a tiny, flattened oval stitched into the padding of the chest fabric. A silent nod from Jordan, and Hazmat collected the garment, sealing it inside a leaden case before rushing it to the scanning lab. 15 minutes later, the signal was isolated and pulled into satellite sync. The screen in the operations room lit up with a travel trail, thin blue lines connecting a dozen locations across Eastern Europe over the past 4 months. Reed traced a finger along the map. He moved constantly, never stayed in one city for more than 48 hours, always within 50 kilometers of known pharmaceutical testing sites. Elena narrowed her eyes. Is it just movement, or are those sites part of a pattern? Monroe leaned in, filtering the points through a heat map overlay. A sick realization bloomed in his voice. It's a grid, he said. Equidistant routes. Every stop falls within a structured radius. Jordan glanced toward him. You're saying he wasn't traveling? You've got 3 regional outbreaks. Respiratory paralysis in children in Vilnius, fainting spells with no cause in Bucharest, and 1 unexplained military base lockdown in southern Ukraine. All occurred within 48 hours of his presence nearby. Dr. Voss stared at the screen. He was shedding active toxin at each site. They were tracking diffusion rates in live populations. Jordan exhaled, stepping back. This isn't just field testing, this is field deployment. Controlled biotransport using a human vector. Elena translated for Dmitri again, hands more urgent now. His reply came slowly, then stopped mid-gesture. He slumped slightly, eyelids fluttering. His heart rate's dropping, Monroe warned. He's crashing again. Whatever they implanted, his body can't keep sustaining it. Jordan's voice was hard. Then we need to know what else they've done to him. Now. The second nanosignal came from the garment seam near the spine. Overlooked at first, assumed to be structural reinforcement, but as Hazmat scanned it under high EMM, it lit up again, a paired unit. Monroe spoke low. Redundant GPS, not for safety, tracking convergence. Reed looked up. They were monitoring 2 points at once? No, Monroe corrected. They were measuring spread. Source versus reach. Jordan's eyes shifted toward the data stream. The passive GPS had been logging not just location but temperature, ambient particle count. Someone had turned Dmitri's body into a traveling data recorder, mapping not just the effect of the toxin but also the behavior of human crowds around him. This was never about infection, Jordan murmured. It was about behavioral analytics. How far can fear travel before anyone sees it? Delana whispered. And now he's in New York. Monroe's voice was barely audible. The final test. A third technician entered quickly, holding a printed analysis. You need to see this, she said, voice trembling. The GPS tags were transmitting bursts every 4 hours. Not to a single endpoint, but to satellites leased by a private comms relay registered to a shell company in Riga. Jordan scanned the document. No owner listed. Just the name Adventum Logistics. Reed scrolled through intelligence databases. Adventum was flagged 2 years ago, suspected in vaccine blackhat trafficking, disappeared after a raid in Tullin. But the funding trail led back to... Jordan turned sharply. Full circle. The technician added, one more thing. The data packet includes a log of biometric thresholds. There's a section marked optimal window. It ends in 14 hours. Monroe's face hardened. Then he wasn't supposed to survive past that. His body was only ever meant to carry the toxin for 1 cycle. After that, the toxin degrades or the host collapses. Jordan turned to Elena. Ask him if he knows what the endpoint was supposed to be. Did they tell him where he would finish? She signed carefully. Dmitri blinked, tears now forming at the corners of his eyes. He responded with a single motion, hands forming a circle, then pressing down flat. Elena's voice cracked. He says, "Here." The end was here, and from the satellite map a new signal blinked to life. Another tracker active within the same grid. Same movement pattern, same signature. But this one wasn't. It was someone else. Already through customs, already past security, and heading toward the international transfer terminal. The second signal on the satellite tracker pulsed steadily, ghosting through the terminal's architecture like a heartbeat embedded in steel. TSA Command diverted all outbound flights from Terminal F while DHS agents swept the adjoining gates with K9 units and thermal imaging. The GPS trajectory was precise. Whoever carried the second implant was inside the airport, moving calmly, possibly unaware of what they carried or fully aware and counting on the chaos to cover their trail. Amid the scramble, Jordan turned away from the digital map to face Elena, who sat at the far end of the debriefing room, now silent, her shoulders slightly hunched forward, hands folded too tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken in the last 10 minutes, not since Dimitri's last sign that here was the end. Reed approached quietly and handed Jordan a folder marked International Corporation. Cross-referenced the refugee camp Dimitri first appeared in Chisinau Medical Intake, under UNHCR registry. Guess who worked there from 2018 to 2021 as a senior sign interpreter? Jordan read the name and froze. Elena Merkovich. Reed nodded slowly. He wasn't just a contractor. She was embedded, part of the intake committee for medical exemptions. She had full access to patient routing, biometric overrides, and travel sponsorship documentation. Jordan's voice dropped. Why wasn't that flagged earlier? Because she scrubbed it. Her resume only starts from 2022, contracting with us through a third-party interpreter agency. Jordan looked through the glass, watching Elena's unmoving profile. And what happened to the Chisinau Medical Intake Facility? Shut down after a whistleblower exposed unauthorized trials. Refugees were being rerouted into experimental relief programs. Official word was they were sent to better abjured hospitals admissions. And she was right in the middle of it, Jordan murmured. Reed glanced down. We should pull her out now. No, Jordan said quickly, not yet. She's still the only one he'll talk to, but I want eyes on her every second. Meanwhile, back in the Central Customs database, Monroe was coordinating with an international passenger verification specialist. Something else just came in, he said, projecting Dimitri's passport history onto the large wall screen. Multiple identities. 5 different names used over 3 years. All linked to the same biometric thumbprint, but no flags until now. Reed joined him, scanning the data. How does someone cross multiple borders under 5 names without tripping an alert? Monroe pointed to a single line of metadata below each entry. Every time he's listed as a medical refugee under the International Health Compassion Corridor. That designation overrides typical screening. It's meant for civilians escaping war zones with urgent care needs. Jordan stepped closer, reading the fine print. The countries he crossed through: Belarus, Moldova, Lithuania. They're not active conflict zones. Not recently. Exactly, Monroe said. So someone was forging the corridor approval, giving these subjects a medical shield to slip past scrutiny. Reed frowned. And this corridor? Who's on the list of certifying agents? Monroe scrolled down. The list was short, only 8 certified evaluators in the region. The 4th name made them stop. Elena Merkovich, Jordan read aloud. Again. Reed whispered. She wasn't just interpreting, she was vouching. In the observation room, Elena remained focused on Dimitri, softly signing reassurances in the same looping cadence she'd used since the beginning. But Jordan began watching her more closely, tracking not her hands but her pauses, the flickers of hesitation in her eyes, the way she sometimes looked over her shoulder as if expecting someone to walk through the door. Back in the lab, Dr. Voss continued parsing Dimitri's exposure timeline. You need to see the route, she said, overlaying Dimitri's travel with clusters of unusual ER admissions across Eastern Europe. Every place he passed through saw the same symptoms appear in local populations. Dizziness, slowed reflexes, temporary motor paralysis. The doses weren't lethal, but they were consistent. Someone was logging the effects, using the corridor for masked field trials. Jordan rubbed the back of his neck. And now we know how they controlled it. Elena's approval opened the door. Dimitri walked through it. Monroe glanced at the active second signal still moving through Terminal F. And now someone else has picked up where he left off. As if on cue, an analyst monitoring back traffic flagged a clip from the previous week. A silent man wearing a hoodie, passing through customs under a different name. They ran the biometric data. Match. Dimitri. Again. But the timestamp's off, Reed said. This was 5 days ago. Jordan's eyes narrowed. He entered before his current passport scan. Exactly, Reed confirmed. Which means this was a decoy pass or a dry run. Whoever planned this ran him through customs multiple times to test tracking protocols. And each time, Jordan added, Elena's signature authorized the transit. They turned together toward the glass once more, where Elena now sat silently beside Dimitri, her eyes distant as if somewhere far beyond the confines of the interview room. Then she stood up slowly, pressed her hand to the glass and signed a single word, "Forgive." And at that moment, security flagged a new ID badge swipe. Elena's access card, activated for a restricted storage area deep under Terminal F, just 60 seconds ago. But she was still in the room. Jordan's breath caught. Someone cloned her credentials, and that meant someone else was using her name not just on paper, but in real time. As the alert for the cloned credential access rippled through the terminal's internal security system, a second team was dispatched to sweep the restricted area beneath Terminal F, while Jordan remained in the debriefing center, his eyes fixed on Elena, whose presence in the room no longer guaranteed innocence, but raised the question of whether her proximity to Dimitri was intentional or circumstantial. Yet even as the investigation unraveled around her, Dimitri himself remained the center of gravity. A silent figure both tragic and terrifying, his breathing shallow, his gaze alternating between vacant dissociation and sharp flickers of awareness. Dr. Monroe stood nearby with an analyst from the Biometric Forensics Division, who had just returned from Quantico's remote matching lab with new data. "You ran a secondary biometric test," she said, placing a digital profile overlay on the table in front of Jordan. Not just on surface prints, but on subdermal dermal ridge degradation, specific to pediatric fingerprints that evolve over time. Jordan frowned. "Why that method?" The analyst continued. "Because Dimitri's fingerprints didn't just come back with aliases. They matched a cold case from 15 years ago. A boy named Alexei Baranov disappeared during the 2010 refugee surge out of Tiraspol. 8 years old. Last seen during the fire at the Kalinov holding facility." Jordan scanned the records. "No confirmed sightings after that?" "None," the analyst confirmed. "Interpol closed the case in 2015, assumed dead. But the subdermal print evolution is a 99.8% match. Dimitri is Alexei." A silence spread between the team as the implications settled. He hadn't just been used recently. He had been lost long before anyone began questioning his purpose. Reed entered with an updated scan from the forensics lab. "You're going to want to see this," she said grimly. We swabbed the interior seam of his shirt again, focusing on the layered fabric just beneath the dispersal tubing. Found micro-residue of lyophilized neurotoxin, a freeze-dried variant designed for rehydration under body heat. Monroe turned sharply. "That formulation wasn't present when we tested the shirt earlier." "Because it wasn't activated then," Reed explained. "The dispersion mechanism was triggered within the last 48 hours. He wasn't exposed during fabrication. He was exposed during transport." Jordan's brow furrowed. "Meaning?" Red exhaled. "Meaning he may not have been carrying this for weeks or months. Someone may have dosed him recently, after arrival in Munich or just before departure from Belarus." Monroe's voice was sharp. "That changes everything. If he wasn't exposed until the final leg of his trip, then he wasn't part of the long-term plan. He was the delivery vehicle for the final phase." Jordan stepped back, connecting the timeline. "He wasn't the first test subject, he was the last. The one they used to bring it here." Red nodded. "Unwitting mule, no understanding of the payload, no control over the timing, just a signature in the air." But Monroe added cautiously, "That doesn't exonerate him entirely. We have a 15-year gap in his life, no records, no sightings. He could have been conditioned, prepped, or worse, trained without memory." Jordan looked through the glass at Dimitri, his profile now childlike, hollow-eyed. skin paler with every passing hour. So which is it? Was he used, or did he become part of it? The analyst added another chilling detail. There's a faint but measurable concentration of toxin inside the padding of his outer jacket, not just residual from leakage. We believe he was in physical proximity to the source, possibly in direct contact with the raw material before he boarded. Jordan's stomach sank. So the clothing was loaded intentionally. He might have helped them prepared, guard, or he might have been dressed by someone else, drugged and sent into motion. Monroe spoke carefully. You realize what this means. If he did assist, willingly or not, he's no longer just a carrier. He's an accessory to biochemical transport into a civilian zone. And if he didn't? Jordan asked. Then he's the most tragic experiment I've ever seen, Monroe answered. Elena remained silent, no longer translating, just watching Dimitri breathe as though counting each inhale, each fragment of life he still carried despite what his body had been made to deliver. A medical aide approached with a new blood panel. Circulating toxin levels are rising, she reported. It's accelerating now. We're estimating systemic failure within 4 hours if the dispersal mechanism isn't neutralized. Jordan turned away from the glass, his voice low. If this thing spreads fully through the terminal, Monroe didn't need to finish the sentence. Reed approached quietly. I pulled footage of Alexei's original intake from 2010. There's one clip, just 6 seconds of blurry video. It shows him walking between 2 masked adults into a van marked as medical outreach. The woman's face is unclear. Jordan turned toward the monitor. Reed hesitated. It resembles Elena. Jordan's breath caught. You're saying she might have known him before all this? I'm saying, Reed clarified, we need to ask whether she ever forgot him, and from the back of the surveillance room, one of the perimeter agents broke over the comm. We found the second subject, female, Eastern European descent, deaf, trying to board an internal connector to Jordan froze. She's wearing a jacket identical to Dimitri's. Same cut, same lining. The comm crackled again. She gave a name at check-in, Elena Mirkovics. The moment the second Elena Mirkovics name was logged boarding an internal flight to DC, the operations center descended into controlled chaos. Agents scrambled between terminals, manifests were rerouted through emergency filters, and facial recognition back-checked every individual processed in the last 72 hours. But amidst the mounting tension, one alert bypassed initial scrutiny, an automated logistics update from a separate terminal, indicating that a medical relief container had just been loaded onto Flight 2417, a transnational cargo flight scheduled to depart in under 20 minutes. Reed spotted it first, her voice sharp. We've got an outbound pallet labeled as WHO-verified medical supplies, declared origin Minsk, transfer through Munich, signed off by E. Mirkovich using Tier 2 diplomatic clearance. Jordan's head snapped around. Where's that flight now? Gate H7, Reed replied. They're stealing the cargo bay as we speak. Monroe stepped forward. The container, if it's the endpoint, it could be rigged as a final dispersal site. Long-range contamination, low visibility. In air transit, there's no checkpoint. Jordan grabbed the secure comm and radioed the field K9 unit. Unit Bravo, reroute to Gate H7, cargo bay access. We need ascent confirmation immediately. Reference target compound, neurotoxin subtype A, trace organic carrier. Kaiser and his handler reached the tarmac in less than 3 minutes. The sun was beginning to set behind the skyline, casting golden rays over the metallic hull of the waiting freighter. 2 ground crewmen stood frozen as federal agents swarmed the loading zone. Kaiser moved with eerie precision. Tail rigid, nose low to the asphalt. He passed crates of insulin, PPE bundles, blood plasma containers, ignoring them all. Then he stopped. A single blue-labeled metal crate, roughly the size of a vending machine, marked sterile reagents, temperature-controlled. He growled low, then barked once, twice, pacing a tight circle around the container, nose twitching violently. The handler called it in. Confirm olfactory match, same sense signature as Subject 1's dispersal source. Intensity elevated. Dr. Voss, listening from the lab via comms, responded instantly. If the scent is stronger, it's likely the concentration is higher. That crate's either an active source or a reserve payload, Jordan's voice was tight. What's the risk if it's opened mid-flight? Impossible to contain, Voss said. Cabin pressure shifts, micro-leaks. Botulinum aerosolized at that concentration could paralyze the full cabin before symptoms are recognized. Then you land in another city with a silent outbreak, Reed chimed in. The shipping manifest shows no connection to Dmitri, but the container ID sequence matches a batch used in that Belarus clinic. The one linked to the original test case. Monroe added, it's a final phase. While everyone focused on Dmitri and the clone Elena, this was already in motion. Jordan turned to the flight crew, shouting, ground that plane now. The airport's emergency protocol kicked in. Fueling was halted. External power was cut. The cargo ramp reopened under full federal override, and all the while, Kaiser remained planted before the crate, unmoving, eyes locked, body vibrating with tension. Technicians in portable containment suits arrived minutes later, wheeling in a pressurized analysis chamber. They lifted the crate slowly using a suction arm rig. No contact allowed. Once inside the chamber, they drilled a micropoint into the external shell and extracted a half-liter air sample. Within 90 seconds, the analysis was back. Dr. Voss read it from the lab display. Concentration is 22 times higher than the residue on Dimitri's clothing. This crate is loaded with live agent gas. No inert carrier, this is pure dispersal toxin. Jordan stared at the screen, heart thudding. Then this wasn't just a test, this was a transfer, a beginning. Reed cross-checked the flight plan. Flight 2417 was routed to Bogota, but with an unscheduled stop in Atlanta for medical coordination. Monroe's face hardened. Atlanta CDC headquarters. They're not just targeting population, they're sending a message. Jordan paced once, then turned toward the secondary monitor where Dmitri still sat, unaware of the chaos around him. He was never the target. He was the proof that the system could be infiltrated. This container, that's the delivery. Reed frowned. So why the clone Elena? Why create a false identity only to draw attention? Meanwhile, the real payload gets quietly moved under full clearance. Back at the crate, Kaiser barked again, more urgently. The technician monitoring the microport shouted, pressure spike, something inside's reacting to ambient air. Jordan's blood went cold. Get that thing into full isolation now. But even as the team prepared containment, another alert pinged on the manifest. A secondary container, same markings, same departure code, loaded 20 minutes earlier to a separate commercial flight. Destination, Washington, D.C. Jordan stared at the screen. It's a distributed release. And from the opposite side of the terminal, an explosion of static burst through the internal comms. Someone had forced access to a server panel near the data relay hub, and from the blurred security cam footage, a woman with shoulder-length dark hair, wearing an airport tech uniform, slipped into the frame for only a second. She wasn't Elena, but Dimitri's eyes lit up when he saw the paused frame. He stood slowly, staggering toward the glass, placing one palm against it. He signed a single word. Sister. The room was quiet, padded with the soft hum of ventilators and distant footsteps echoing across polished hospital tiles. Dmitri, or rather, Alexei Baranov, lay motionless beneath a thin sheet, eyes half open but unfocused, the lights above him dull and filtered, like sunlight through fog. A week had passed since the emergency containment protocols had shut down 3 major U.S. airports, since Flight 2417 and its sister cargo route to D.C. had been intercepted. Both containers had been secured, samples transferred under military custody, and the Department of Homeland Security had sealed the final report under top-secret classification, naming the case Project Charon. In the psychoneurology ward of Langley's Federal Medical Unit, Dr. Lena Sturman studied Alexei's latest neuroimaging results. Daw sat tight behind a disposable mask, her finger tracing one aberrant spike on the cortisol chart. You're seeing here, she explained to Jordan and Monroe, isn't natural trauma. These hormone levels suggest long-term neurochemical modulation, purposeful, likely initiated during early development. They conditioned his brain to avoid retention, to suppress memory under stress, to associate obedience with relief. Essentially, he was chemically groomed to forget, to follow, and never question. Jordan's voice was low. How long would a protocol like this take? Years, she answered. You'd need consistent exposure from early childhood. The most disturbing part is that his adrenal reactions were tuned to specific auditory frequencies, meaning they used sound to prime fear response. They didn't just raise him in silence. They made him afraid of silence being broken. Monroe stepped closer to the glass, watching Alexei's fingers twitch against the sheet, forming fragmented signs, even in sleep. And the toxin? Dr. Sturman replied, fully purged from his bloodstream. His immune response is abnormal. He may have been exposed to low doses for years, enough to create a tolerance. He was their experiment, but also their container. Meanwhile, in a debriefing room 2 floors below, Reed ran through surveillance captures of the woman who had breached the server panel, whose face had triggered Alexei's only moment of recognition. The feed never resolved into clarity, but her movement, her stature, and the brief contact with the data node suggested someone deeply familiar with the system. The working theory pointed to her being a sibling, possibly separated in the same refugee crisis 15 years prior, raised in parallel, conditioned under different parameters. But no trace of her remained after she exited the terminal. That same night, another alert appeared, this one from a rural train station outside Pittsburgh. Grainy footage showed a woman boarding the 315 southbound line, one hand gripping a worn canvas bag, the other gently guiding a young boy by the shoulder. The boy moved carefully, eyes darting with the same nervous sharpness Alexei once displayed. He wore no hearing aids. When the conductor asked for their tickets, the woman responded not with words, but with signs. Fluent, practiced, maternal. The timestamp matched the final ping of Elena Merkovich's access badge. Back at the hospital, Jordan stood in the hallway, reading the final medical report. Diagnosis: induced dissociative amnesia, combined with trauma bond reinforcement through hormonally controlled neuroplasticity. In short, Alexei's entire identity had been broken and rebuilt around obedience. A life designed not to be lived but to be used. Yet in the last 24 hours, he had begun repeating a gesture, over and over. The sign for home, followed by a circle drawn with his finger on his chest, then 2 taps over his heart. When asked what it meant, he signed simply, "I'm remembering." In a sealed evidence room, the contents of the intercepted containers were cataloged and locked into cryo-hustle. The toxin had a unique signature now labeled BX57-K for forensic continuity. No known lab claimed responsibility. All leads into Adventum Logistics had gone dark. Servers wiped clean. Bank trails vanished behind diplomatic firewalls. Ina's apartment had been found empty, stripped of personal effects, no forwarding address. But tucked beneath the floorboards was a file, printed in faint ink, containing photos of Alexei at different ages. In one, he was 6 years old, holding the hand of a woman whose face was obscured by the camera flash, but whose silhouette unmistakably mirrored Alexei. In the following weeks, the government issued a silent memo to international intelligence partners. Monitor medical corridors, tighten biometric overlays, and watch for patterns of disappearance around refugee transit routes. Unofficially, Project Charon was declared dormant. But at Langley, Alexei still sat in silence most days, staring through the reinforced window. He never asked to leave. He never asked about the toxin or the agents or the mission that had brought him across continents. He only asked once, quietly, in a sign that trembled as it formed, "Is she safe?" No one answered. Outside the hospital, the wind rustled dry leaves across the sidewalk. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, on a train that no one tracked, a woman taught a deaf boy how to spell his name in the air, her fingers deliberating, her eyes watchful. And beneath that silent gesture, a new cycle began. If this story moved you or kept you on the edge, consider subscribing for more narratives that dig deep into the human condition. What part hit you the hardest? Do you believe Alexei was ever truly free? And where in the world are you watching from right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one.